Hello. This week we're going to talk about composition because we're going to start diving into environmental art. And in order for us to really talk about that, we need to talk about how, sort of on an abstract level, how pictures make us feel, and how to use that to our advantage in composition. So there's theory and then there's practice behind it as well. It's a very complicated subject. I won't be able to go over every single aspect of what makes a good composition in this lecture, but I'll be able to kind of get you started on looking at pictures a different way, right? So one of the key things on looking at a picture for composition is in terms of like, if you shrunk it down, right? Like where does your eye go in that image, right? And over here you could see like, the bottom left hand corner right there. Over here's the right side of the composition. This the right side of the composition. So what does that immediately kind of tell you is like our eyes tend to go where the composition is either the brightest or has the most contrast, right? So looking at these images right here, if you were to blur your eyes and squint and really reduce them down, like really think about it in terms of like what does your picture buy you when you take away all the details, right? Like when your picture is a blur, is it still clear? Is it still interesting? Does it still evoke the feeling that you want to evoke towards the audience, right? So for example, this one on the bottom corner here, a bunch of sharp shapes. How does sharp shapes make you feel, right? Obviously uneasy, makes you feel like there's some kind of a sense of danger, right? If there's let's say if there's something large and looming overhead, above you in the picture, how's that make you feel, right? So in order to get into that, let's talk about like where to put focal points, and how putting focal points or subjects in certain areas of the picture plane, how that makes you feel. And in order to do that, there's a book by an author named Bruce Block called The Visual Story, and he's got several examples within there. And if you ever take like a visual communications class or anything like that, they'll break it down for you like this fairly easily. So over here I've got frame one, and ignore these other ones right here for now. Let me make it more clear for you all. So I'm just gonna ignore some of these on the side for now and just focus on frame one and frame two, right? So let me just, and then we'll zoom in again, and then we'll get back into our picture. Aha! Wait. Okay, around there. Okay, frame one and frame two. Right. So let's just imagine if that dot was our subject matter. How's that? You know. So so if I were to put a dot in the middle for frame one, and let's say it was like that, and then I had like the dot like over here for frame two. So look at frame one and look at frame two. Okay, which frame is more dynamic, right? And how does frame one make you feel versus frame two? How's that make you feel, right? So frame two is more dynamic because it's off center, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that frame one is trash and awful. It just means that frame one doesn't feel like there's movement happening on the composition, or there's no sense of the focal point going off center, right? In frame one, this is often how we take photos of people, when we take vacation photos and such, right? Sort of a center subject matter. But how does that make you feel when you look at something that is dead in the center of the picture, right? It feels stable. It feels like it's eternal and standing there for all time and such, right? Which actually explains a lot of religious art or things, that deal with monarchies or government and things like that. It's very formal, right? So like if this was a person right here, right, and that was their head, like this feels very stable, eternal, unmoving, that kind of thing. Whereas this is a little bit more casual, I guess, but it's also more dynamic as far as a picture goes. So this is like an example of like, how these composition exercises work. So I've got here I've got frame 1, which is let's just say a little subject over here, and then frame 2, a little subject over here. Okay, which one's more dynamic? Which one feels more, I don't know, like between something that is static versus something that's dynamic, right? Well, frame 2 feels more dynamic in this instance. It's probably because it's so above us in the composition that we feel like it could fall on us. And so there's like something within us that calls danger when things are hanging above us. And this also, comes to mind not just with like a dot, but like say for example, if you walked into a room and there were all these things above you that could fall on you, like or it could be a creature or something that's up there, and it could pounce on you, right? Attack you from above, right? Whereas frame 1 feels a lot more stable. It feels like it's on the ground and there's less of a danger. I mean, you could trip over it, I guess, but the stuff that is in frame 2 right here, let's bring it back to just something above us generally feels like it's more dynamic. Very, very simple on the most basic level, right? So let's do another exercise. So frame 1 is let's say it's wait, where's the is my selection. Aha. Okay, say this is frame 1. Now we're talking about lines instead of dots, right? So this is frame 1. And then this is frame 2. Okay, which is more dynamic and which is less dynamic? Well, frame 1 is just, I don't know, a person laying down on the ground, I guess, or something. It's at rest, right? Frame 2 is standing straight up, and therefore frame 2 feels a bit more dynamic than frame 1. Now let's change that up even more, right? So if we wanted frame 1 to be more dynamic than frame 2, what can we do? Well, if we had a line that was a diagonal, that's even more dynamic than frame 2. Why? Why is that? Why does frame 1 with the diagonal line feel more dynamic than frame 2? Well, it's because this is maybe a skyscraper, and then this on frame 1 is like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Like, it feels like it's about to fall, right? And just imagine if you were like a person standing right there, right? Like, this is dangerous, right? That thing's about to fall on you, right? And so diagonal lines tend to feel a little bit more dynamic, and it's also because it feels like it's moving or in mid-movement or about to move, right? Like, there's already things associated with it, like, say, for example, if today was a particularly windy day and we saw a lot of palm trees that were just blowing in the wind, like, at this diagonal direction, right? And that immediately feels like, there's movement happening within a picture, right? So let's bring it back to just the line, right? So let's get to the next one here. On this one's not so much a frame 1 or 2, but like where's your eye go? All right, so let's say, for example, well, actually, yeah, let's do a frame 1 and 2, right? And then on frame 2, we've got, here, and then we got this thing right there. Okay. And it doesn't have to be at the bottom of the composition. It could be up here if we wanted it to be, right? So, where's your eye go on frame 1 versus where's your eye go on frame 2? Well, on frame 1, it's a little bit harder for me to, understand where my eye should go, but ultimately, I guess my eye might go to the one in the center, right? Just because it's like, I don't know, like I feel like I'm in the center. It's kind of like a weird ego thing, I guess, maybe. But it's all kind of even, If the center one was bigger, maybe, then it's like definitely that one. The bigger one is me, right? But most of the time, how do we feel as people? We feel like this person right here. The one that's singled out, that is away from the group. And so there's this thing called clustering that happens within a composition. Like, we could even have, a stack of things or whatever right here. But the individual one that's, away from the crowd, that's the one that our eye tends to move toward, because something deep inside us goes, that's me. Okay. But yeah, if you had this frame 1, it's like, what's more dynamic, the bigger thing or the smaller thing? Well, the bigger thing, right? Okay. Let's talk about another thing where it's like, what's more dynamic? How about that? Let's go looking on a road. Like, imagine that was the horizon right there, right? And I'm just like, I'm moving down the highway, right, towards the horizon. And then I've got, let's say, another one where it's like, okay. Both of these images kind of depict a road, right? And which one's more dynamic? Well, the first one is just kind of like, I know where I'm going. I'm going right there, right? And the second one tends to be more dynamic in this situation. Why? Because I'm going here, and then I'm moving my thing over here, and then I'm zigzagging back over there. So over here, there's like, I'm making a stop here, and I'm making another stop there, and, so more dynamic. Also diagonals, right? More diagonals. So there we go. This frame 2 leads your eye through different areas of the picture, whereas frame 1 is just kind of like, right here. You better put something interesting right there on your picture. Because if I look up there and there's nothing there, I'm like, what a boring picture. Right? It's like, you've led me on this journey. It better lead somewhere good, right? Let's see. Well, let me draw like a face. Let's see if I can draw a face. There's a little face, right? And let me duplicate that face now with Control J. All right, frame 1, frame 2. Which one's more dynamic? Is the one in the center of the composition more dynamic? I mean, there's this thing about center and off center, right? You know, well, what if frame 2 was centered as well? Okay, so that's in the center, right? But what if frame 2 was like that? So anytime things get cropped, I don't know, there's something uneasy about it. Whereas it's like, why aren't you turning the camera a little bit closer towards? Why isn't this character in frame, right? Like this is still, you know, frame 2, off center, more dynamic, right? But it's just kind of like, well, now this person's like hiding or something and kind of creepy, right? Right. Let's also talk about horizons. So, frame 1, frame 2. And then we could even, like, I don't know, like, put a gradient on this thing. Yeah, so we know what's the ground, what's the sky, right? What's more dynamic, frame 1 or frame 2? Well, frame 1, you know, splits the composition straight down the middle, pretty much, right? That's like almost in the center. And frame 2 is at the bottom of the composition, right? So what's more dynamic? Frame 2 is more interesting. We're seeing more of the sky, less of the ground. And actually it'd be just as interesting if we were to, let's say, move this where we see more of the ground and less of the sky. That's still more dynamic than frame 1, right? So let's say, for example, if frame 2 was like that, that'd be still more dynamic than frame 1, you know? There's actually a really good scene in The Fabelmans where Steven Spielberg kind of shows one of his childhood, you know, growing up. He met John Ford, who's like a super famous director of old westerns, and John Ford had these paintings on the wall, and he was just like, look at the paintings on the wall, you know, where's the horizon, you know, and basically, like, Spielberg, being kind of a noob at the time, is just like really nervous trying to describe the pictures to John Ford, and John Ford's like, no, I don't care about like the cowboys and the Indians inside this picture. I just care about where the horizon is. And then he taught him a lesson. He's like, when the horizon's at the top of the picture, it's interesting. When the horizon's at the bottom, excuse me, it's interesting. When the horizon's down the middle, it's boring as shit. So, yeah, that was like a really fun scene in The Fabelmans. Anyways, yeah, so where's the horizon? Okay. Let's say, for example, if you had a picture and you wanted to change the frame. So, like, say for example, you know, this is your composition here, right? But let's say, for example, if I don't know, you want a more vertical composition. Well, all you got to do is put something in your picture composition that covers up that, and now this is kind of your frame, which means whatever this subject is now framing your composition, right? So for example, you could block off the right and the left of your picture. Let's say with that, right? Like this would be an object, like a wall or I don't know, a tree or something like that, you know, that's in your way, right? You can actually change your compositions based on the framing elements, because as things start framing things within a picture, you start you know, so say for example, you know, even here, right, if I start splitting up this composition with like say a horizon line right now that's way up high, and then I were to, let's say, lighten it up, because you know now that's the ground, right? And then I had like say a little house right here that's framed by, you know, this, right? It's like, oh, okay, nice little picture, but now I've kind of almost done my cropping for me using objects to frame a subject matter. How else do I, well, I mean, you know, it's pretty obvious, look at the house, right? But how else do I make you look at the house, right? Well, let's say, for example, if maybe this tree that's over here isn't, you know, isn't just standing straight up on my composition. Let's say, for example, if the tree in the foreground was somehow pointing my eye towards that house. Yeah, let's say it was like one of these, I don't know, like a dead tree or something like that, right? So let's see if I can actually fill this in with my paint bucket tool. Yeah, something like that. And then I grab this compositionally, and then I had it kind of point my composition towards that subject matter. Or maybe this was a river or something. It could be that or anything. But physically pointing at something helps, right? Sometimes what you can do is let the flow of things point you towards the subject matter as well. So, say for example, if this little house right here was say down lower, right? Oh, there's my house. Okay. Boop. Right there. You know, but if I had like say clouds in the sky or something like that, you know, I'll do that. Let's say for example, if the clouds in the sky kind of did this nice sweeping motion, right? What does that do? Well, it makes me pay attention to this thing right here, you know? And then you can also, at this point, try to balance out your composition. What do I mean by that? Well, there's this thing, if you were to look at your picture plane like a seesaw. So let's say, for example, if I looked at my picture plane and I described to you like a little seesaw right here. I don't know. I'm trying to make this feel like it's the center. I think that's kind of the center. Yeah, let's just say that was the center. And oh shoot, I needed a, yeah, okay. So let's say, for example, if that was the center of my composition. There's this way of getting balance to a composition. So boring balance is what? What's boring balance? Well, you just make a object in your composition like this big, and then you make another object about the same size. Well, that's kind of boring. They're equal distance from center and they're the same size. Well, there's other ways to create balance in a composition. Say, for example, if you had like a large object right here, but then you had a small subject, and the small object wasn't the same distance away from center. If that small object was a little bit further away, you can almost picture that sort of seesaw thing where when something's further away, it's almost like, you know, heavier or something. You know, it's like, so this can help you create, you know, a balanced composition where this, or let's say for example, if my subject on here was so large that not only did it take up space on the left hand side of the composition, but it also took up space on the right hand side as well. Well, then this thing over here doesn't have to be that big, and it'd still be a interesting little composition, right? So you know, you're like, prove it. Okay, well, I'll prove it. Just let's say, for example, if this was a mountain, right? Like let's say you're moving down a canyon or something like that. It's like, right? And I don't know, maybe there's another one over here. But then over here is kind of where our focal point is, and say that was like, I don't know, like a city, or I don't know, like a little cave right there or something, you know. Obviously this thing over here should be lighter, like that, right? And then, you know, we could play around with value as well. I'm gonna use a gradient now. You know, that can balance out your composition, you know. Composition's a funny thing, you know. It's like, one of the first things that I think what people tend to do when they start painting compositions, a really good exercise actually, is, you know, you kind of put a slant or something like a frame over here, put some kind of a subject matter right here, usually a tree or something like that, and then you have like maybe another one that's the next layer, but then now we've got like, say, this road, right? That kind of, this is like a typical composition that I see a lot. And then say there was another tree right here, and then off center, right, is some kind of like a cool city or castle or some kind of a, you know, destination of some sort. It's like follow the yellow brick road situation, right, like that. And so you could have like all these sweeping lines that kind of help frame this thing, and maybe there's also like something over here, you know, that, you know, because yeah, you don't ever want to just put one tree in. It's like one tree's like really obvious, so you want to put in another tree, maybe, you know, let's say like, I don't know, like this or something. But you don't want that tree to be like too big. Why? Because the hierarchy should probably be like, you know, the destination, that we want to get to. So let's say, for example, you got this thing right here in the middle. And then we've got our destination right there. Here's our tree in the foreground, right? And then, let's see, usually this gets real dark, right? This one right here, I think we can go much lighter than what we've got right now, so that it feels like it's further away from us. So let's do that. And let's just go something like that, right? And this one, I know it's about the same distance as away from us as that, so it could be a little lighter in the back, but overall, it's just like there, our foreground's still darker. And then off here in the distance here is our let's say our Emerald City or whatnot, like that, right? That's kind of a typical composition I would expect us to be able to paint regularly. Oh yeah, obviously you want like little mountains in the background too. They're even lighter, it's just kind of, it's pretty simple composition overall, but yeah, even lighter than that, right? And then you could have some clouds in the sky, and what does the cloud do? Well, the clouds can help point us to where our eye needs to go, which would be, this thing right here. So this is usually lesson 1 on composition. It's just kind of, like this, and then even these abstract shapes somehow still kind of point us to that, right? So this is gonna slowly lead us into our assignment for today, which is composition, and the things that we can do to really show depth and some kind of like things that can help us create the illusion of depth within a composition. So the first thing that I want you all to realize is there's this thing called atmospheric perspective. So as things go off into the distance, they tend to get lighter and less contrasty than the stuff in the foreground. So atmospheric perspective, if I were to type that in, you'll see some cool images as examples, right? So you could see in this image, this, let's just say this mountain's like the same kind of material and all that as the mountain back here, except, that one's got snow on it, but even down here. But this is much darker than that one over there, and the reason why is because there's particles in the air, and moisture and dust and all sorts of stuff that we tend to call like thick air. And so and you can even see like over here there's like a fog or something that's kind of between each one of these layers that is created. Now this is something that occurs within nature, and it's often used by artists to show depth, in a concept painting, for example. Darker, lighter, even lighter, less contrast. Eventually it just becomes a silhouette shapes, right? This is a good exercise for us to do, at least at the beginning of everything. Is just let's maybe make some abstract shapes, landscapes where it go foreground towards the middle ground towards the background. The other things that you want to keep in mind is scale, right? So things that are, larger can look like they're closer to us, but not always, right? Like over here, even though this is not as large as that mountain, it's still closer to us. Well, that's because of the value that this subject matter is being painted. Like these trees look like they're closer to us because they're darker than whatever trees may be back there, right? So that's how we tell objects that are away from us versus objects that are close to us, and also how we tell, sort of like get a sense of what the scale is. Now, this mountain is definitely larger than that mountain, but it's also probably also because it's closer to us, not just like its actual size, so scale. What's another thing that helps us tell what's in the foreground versus what's in the background? Well, overlap, So say, for example, in my example here, I've got, the tree right here, right? Parts of the leaves and such, they're like falling and such, and they're overlapping that stuff in the background, right? We have our trees kind of pointing at that thing. We've got our road that points us over here. Back onto overlap. This road overlaps that and overlaps the, so you could even do some overlaps even within here. And then you can make this thing slightly darker, right? So it's like, just one swipe. That's it. Immediate depth, right? Just as far as like even within my middle ground, I have things that kind of are closer to us in space. Immediate depth, right? Imagine, if you will, at the beginning of this exercise that you're not necessarily dealing with something that's black that's far away versus something that's light gray that's close to us, because then you can give the argument then that there's like a material change, right? At the beginning of this exercise, let's just assume things are generally the same material, and I just want to see us going from foreground, middle ground, the background, and I want the things in the background to start fading away. Okay. We have other things that I can do here, but I think this is a good place to take a break, and then I'll come back and I'll show more examples of this. Okay.